I gotta just come over and clap real quick because that'll help me get the synchronization easier. Just do a little.
You're about to experience an interview with second-generation Italian immigrants and their experience immigrating to Pitcairn. The following interview was conducted to delve deeper into the Italian culture. All of what you're about to see is unscripted and purely genuine.
Hi, I'm Freddie Mendocino, the oldest son of Antonio and Anna Mendocino that came from Nocera Terranese, Italy.
I'm Anna and Antonio's granddaughter, Krista Magnaga, and my uncle's name, his real name is
Fortunato.
Fortunato. So,
My name is Dave Logan, and I'm Irish. So I'm not part of the. I guess I am part of the family.
I'm Elizabeth Mendocino Logan, and I'm Anna and Tony's daughter.
Okay, perfect. All right, you guys please tell us your story about your parents and their immigration to America.
Well, we're not quite sure when my father came from Italy. We're not real sure of the date, but my mom came in 1936.
Okay.
And my father had built her a home in their hometown, and everything was new, and she left her bed and all of the dollies and everything fixed because she was only coming for a couple of weeks, and then she was going to go back. But then when she came here and saw the way husbands and wives lived together, she didn't think it was right to go back to Italy. So she remained here and never went back
Here in
until my
Pitcairn?
brother took her back in
66.
1966. And she
30
left
years
all her
later.
family there. So
It is clear that Italian immigrants enjoyed America and the life that it provided, and the opportunities that it also provided for women specifically, due to the fact that 1 out of every 6 people living in Pittsburgh in 1930 was an immigrant, and most of them were Italian.
Our next question is, how did you guys end up in Pitcairn in specific? Like, what was the, or how did your parents end up in Pitcairn, and what was like the draw to wanting to be in Pitcairn as opposed to New York?
They got here because his oldest brother lived here. I'm not sure how he got located here, but then there was a lot of employment available. There were a lot of industry, the Westinghouses, the railroad was the big industry, and my dad worked quite some time on the railroad. Well, he was partners with his brother in the bar originally. Then when the older brother died, his family took over the business, and my dad got left out. Then he went to other jobs.
So I think that's a good segue into skipping to a question, which is, what can you tell me about your father's life on the railroads?
Well, something that he would say was there were a lot of immigrants that worked on the railroad, and it appears maybe they were taken advantage of because they were good workers. So they would make them do a lot of the hard jobs, and the immigrants were glad to be working and making money, so it was kind of a win-win. The railroad won, and they were making money.
It's evident that upon immigrating to America, Italians were looking for any way to make money. While the conditions were poor, they were happy to live a life in America.
And the next one is, how has your Italian heritage impacted your life, views, and living in Pitcairn in specific?
and every Friday my grandmother would make bread. That was her tradition. She always made bread on Friday. So Friday she made buns, and she also made pizza. So every Friday was pizza day. She had homemade sauce and she had homemade dough, and she had her homemade buns, and then she would have her pizza. And then there was a food bank, and they qualified for the food bank, and they would get what you call like the block of government cheese, and it was like American or cheddar, and we would sometimes have that on our pizza because that's what they had. That's what was available.
Yeah.
So, and we loved it.
my mom lived next to the church too, by the way.
And then until I was 5, we lived there as well. So I think it's something that happened with these families that came over from, Italy and other countries like that. That multi-generational families lived together. I know my cousins in New York, they had the same situation. They had like an upstairs of their house and a downstairs. And, you know, some of the family lived downstairs and some of the family lived upstairs. And that's the way this was over at my grandparents. My dad and my mom and I, and then when my oldest brother, David, was born, we all lived upstairs. And my grandparents lived downstairs. But it was kind of a free-for-all because it was kind of open. So David and I just ran up and down the steps all day long with my grandparents. We were just always all together. But I think that happened with a lot of people that immigrated over. It was easier to live together, and everybody just kind of shared what they had.
So that kind of leads into one of the questions that I have down here. What do you think the sense of community is like for Italian immigrants, specifically in Pitcairn?
One of the main centers of community was the church, St. Michael's Catholic Church. Just about all the Italian immigrants that went to church went to St. Michael's Church. And the church did have a lot of activities, and your immigrants were very active in the activities of the church. Some of the baking, cooking, functions, they were deeply involved. Some of them eventually got into politics, like I did myself. I became mayor of Pitcairn, and then my good friend was on council, and he was ended up president of council. So
yeah, you're right. The church was a big thing. You know, every Sunday everybody went to church, and then typically what Italian people did on Sundays was they would get up early and they would start their sauce and then go to church, and then the big meal of the day was eaten after church around 1 o'clock. And a lot of people, like a lot of my relatives in New York, they still do that on Sundays. They still have their big meal at 1 o'clock. And that's what they would, you would eat after church all together as a family.
I guess I'll ask you a different question here.
Next.
So there are obviously a lot of Italian traditions, especially within the family and in Pitcairn. But what traditions have you guys personally carried on to this day?
Well, Christmas Eve was a big tradition in our family. And I have to say that all through the years, my mother and father carried it through me and Skip and carried it along, and Freddie. And then when the children came, we'd always have Christmas Eve. It consists of 7 fishes. It doesn't matter what kind of fish you want, what kind of fish you like. It was 7 fishes, and usually broccoli, and usually spaghetti with no sauce. And, you know, it was a 7-fish Friday. And we carried that on, and we still do it. We still do it. Although we don't do 7, do we, Chris?
Had we never conducted this interview, Nolan and I would have never heard about these Italian traditions that are still carried out to this day by many immigrants.
And on Easter, my grandmother used to make this beautiful Easter meat pie, and it was huge, and it was about this long, and it was with her homemade dough, and it was different meats and different cheeses, and then you put like a bread dough over top of it, and then she always took a little bit of the dough and she would twist it and she would make a cross on the top, and then she would bake it. It would take her all morning, and she would do it on Good Friday. Of course, you couldn't eat meat on Good Friday, and then you would break your Lenten fast on Saturday by eating this traditional pizza.
that pizza, it's like big rectangle, 3 inches thick, loaded. And like Krista said, couldn't have it on Friday. And at that time, fasting lasted till noon Saturday. And then we'd be like vultures around the table here. You know, here's that cut up pieces. And my mom, you had to wait till it was noontime because it was loaded with meat.
I think I remember hearing about a tradition you used to participate in, Sis, which was sausage making. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, boy, too bad I didn't bring a picture down. The best picture I have in my house.
We have it.
I have it.
You have a copy of that picture?
Yes.
It was called soprasat. homemade superset. It's like a salami. And it was a project that took several days. You got the meat. It was fresh hams, pork butts. You made the meat, trimmed away all the fat. My dad, he would, if you were losing meat, he'd get upset with you. So you had to trim the fat off. And we would make this, and typically we would make it the end of December, beginning of January.
Because you have to hang it out.
Then you hang it to cure, and it would take about 2 months to cure. Well, this is bragging, but we made some of the best you could. It was so lean, no fat in it.
Tell them about the seasoning. How you knew how much?
Oh,
was
that-
it like a half a cup or a cup?
Yeah, how I came to learn the seasoning. My dad and his two friends were making it, and then they would have all this lean meat in the bin, and they would count hands of meat,
Italian friends.
and so many hands of meat. Then they'd put salt in. I said, Pap, why don't you measure and weigh it? You chemical engineer, you think you know everything. But anyhow, so the next 2 years, without him knowing, I would weigh it secretly, and 2 years in a row, the key was having the right amount of salt, and the salt, because the way they did it, count hands of meat, 20 hands of meat, 20 handfuls of salt. I said, Pap, different hands of salt. Same person had to do that. Make a long story short, you come out, you needed 2% salt, and then the hot pepper was about half that, 1%, or paprika, that gave it the color, and then half of that for the hot. And actually there was a big write-up in the Post-Gazette about the supersat, and there was a picture. My dad was so proud. When that thing was in the paper, there was a picture of my dad, me,
Oh, I'll get it.
and my son sitting on the front step. And then they had an article, front page, this article in the paper. My dad was only about 5'4", but that article was in the paper about the superset. He was about 6'3".
Oh, when you made the superset, there was no talking. It was very serious. Nobody talked. I went down one time and said, "Hey, how you doing? Man, I got the exodus really quick. Like, we're making superset. I don't even know what that is." So that was a very serious operation.
So I think maybe like a good wrapping up question is, are there any places in Pitcairn that were special to you?
But the places, well, when I moved back to Pitcairn, I became president of the Italian Club and was president of the Italian Club for, well, till I ran for mayor. And so for about 16 years I was president of the club, and then ran for mayor and turned over the club to other people.
Both my grandparents had a really strong faith, and I think the church was probably one of the things that, for them. I can remember walking to church with my grandfather. We would just walk because it was close enough to walk, and both my grandparents, like I said, they had a very strong faith. And about a year ago, our church closed.
Closing of the church was a very sad event. The one other place that closed, last summer was that we missed is Phil's Pharmacy. This was an Italian pharmacist. Went to Duquesne. He was more than just a pharmacist.
He was a friend.
As we concluded the interview, there was talk about returning to Italy, as talking about the culture and how it has impacted their lives in Pitcairn made them reminisce.
I guess I'll have to take you this
No,
this
I'm not going
summer.
anywhere. No, I'm not. No.
You got to shut it off soon. The fighting's going to start.
Alright, we good?
We made it.
Thank you guys so much. I
No, you're
truly
welcome.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you
Yeah.
for having the interest